Hi, everyone. This is Ansho, and this is the June15 Podcast. And today we have with us Chris Tabb. Chris is a serial entrepreneur. After his last exit, he joined RightWorks. He is the leader of their M&A platform, and he is passionate about leveraging technology, building a service provider expert ecosystem, and using these two things to streamline the M&A process, especially for accounting firms. Chris, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Anshul, for having me. I've seen a lot of your content. I know we've been talking for 6 months or more, so this feels a little overdue, but I'm happy to be here and excited to talk about resourcing and technology and automation and all the cool things that I know that we overlap on.
Yeah, so let's start with an easy one. Tell us more about your background. What you've done, how did you end up in the M&A space, and especially for like accounting firms?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm 40 years old now. I think you talk to anybody in the technology agency space, right? They've probably had a couple of careers by now. No different with me. I started off in agency world, 12, 13 years ago, worked my way up. Really, early focus of my career was working on as many different types of clients and technologies. So often I would go work at a marketing agency for a year and a half and then make a jump to a completely different industry, whether that be healthcare or automotive or fintech, right? And did that early on, and then eventually got to a place where I was working more on the product side of developing, what does an enterprise piece of technology look like? Worked for a company for a couple of years in their innovation department, and then yeah, you're right, Anshul. I had a company. I got really lucky with some friends. We built some early software around Google My Business. So essentially, one click, sort of update your listing, update everything, and like all hype cycles, right? Sort of GMB was the leader at that point. It was like the number one
Mhm.
organic source, and then actually ended up getting into a situation where I went to work for a family office. They had a piece of technology that we were working on. They decided to go in a different way, and then I was able to raise some capital to go ahead and purchase that company, and then ran it, and then actually ended up exiting out to the investor base, which is always a nice story.
Yeah. Um, so tell us more about like what's happening in the M&A world, right? What are some trends you're seeing in the M&A space?
Yeah, and, I don't want to be contrarian here, but I think often, when people think M&A and accounting, they will think about the $50 million deals, right? The $100 million deals, the big sort of top 100s that are acquiring the smaller firms, and that's absolutely going on. But that's a little bit north of where my focus is on, where I'm looking at sort of the sub $5 million market, more of that traditional Main Street business market. And there are absolutely, M&A transactions taking place. They're picking up. The one caveat I would just add is that you probably don't see much private equity activity in the sub $5 million market. And that's primarily just, due to margins, operation costs. A lot of the opportunities right now for private equity are north of that 5 million, but that doesn't mean that over time, right, they're not going to make their way downstream, and you can see it, right? You go ahead and you bundle maybe 10, 40 shops, and then you throw a piece of AI technology on it, standardize the entire operation, maybe work with somebody like yourself, right, to lower those resourcing costs. And now you've got a piece of the puzzle that you could potentially fit into a roll up. You could go ahead and sell that, right, at an X multiple. So there's a lot of different you know components in the future that we need to be looking for. But I think primarily most transactions are either at the broker level or they're occurring between, two like-minded parties, right? One accounting firm to another accounting firm.
One of the posts you had on LinkedIn was different types of buyers that you're seeing. I love that. So tell us more about that because I agree with you, right? We will talk about this part later where I'm also seeing a lot of interest. I thought it would be from like bigger firms, but it's actually from smaller firms, less sub 5 million. So tell us more about those different kinds of buyers because that was a super interesting post.
Yeah, and it really bookends nicely with my point there around private equity. They're not the enemy at all. That's not how I want to paint this conversation. They just may not be the right solution for a lot of firms who are strongly built on legacy, value, servicing, clients at a high quality. Again, not saying these things don't happen in PE. However, I think also when you start to put things through the lens of what are the different types of buyers that exist outside of that, you're getting into your sort of your legacy value people, folks who understand what you built, they want to continue it, and they're not going to essentially buy your business and then deconstruct it, rip it apart, right, or maybe sell off components of it. Um, then you also have businesses that are coming in and they're ahead on the technology curve, right? So you hear a lot about modern firm. How do you make your modern firm journey? There are a lot of entrepreneurs right now who feel like they've nailed that on what does modern firm look like, processes, people, and then if they're starting to scale it out, now they're starting to sort of maybe pick up some practices at a discount price. And you see that a lot, like in the price, especially if the business owner is 70, 75, right? At this point they're not necessarily looking through the lens of succession planning and what they've been doing the last 5 years to increase the multiple or the value of their firm. They may be in a situation now where it's like they're just tired, or they want to get out, or there's been some sort of health event, maybe a partner has passed away, and it's a completely different paradigm. And I think if you're looking at it through that lens of where can I maybe pick up some discount practices, where can I pick up some really good deals, there are a lot of good deals in the $5 million market.
That's very interesting. So, what are some of the reasons why people are selling outside of the fact that, they're retiring or there's been like a health event with themselves or the partner? Like, what are some other reasons that so many sellers are coming forward now?
Well, I think you did name a couple of the top scenarios. I would add
Okay.
on to that. Um, how do I want to say this? Um, they haven't kept up with technology, right? And it's finally caught up to them. So they may be a traditional paper practice, very relation oriented. People are coming to the practice, right? Um, and I'm not telling a dirty secret of the industry. Everybody's aware of this,
Yeah.
right? There are practices out there that are still operating in sort of more of a traditional capacity. And I think, especially as you see the explosion of AI coming in, a lot of these firms are just caught on their back foot. Sure, there's a never-ending supply of work in the accounting practice, right? That's not, you never sort of hear that, like I can't get enough clients. What it really though is that it's just not efficient processes. It makes it very difficult to do business with you. If you're going to have somebody come in and purchase that firm, right, you might be at like a D or a C in terms of technology modernization scores. And it makes it a little bit more difficult for a buyer to come in at that point because they really have to have the vision or the existing processes to sort of recognize that for what it is, and then take it forward.
I really like the point about the legacy you mentioned that a lot of these firms they've built a legacy, right? I see that in what I do because when I talk to these firms that, hey, let's build a global team for you. You don't have to outsource, build your own team. One of the biggest things I hear about is we're a local firm, right? We are known, like we are proud to be from the city. We hire from the city. We serve people in our state. Like so there's this mindset or there's this mental barrier they need to get over. They're like, wow, now I'm going to be a global firm. So that mental adjustment takes a while. So I can see how they would prefer a buyer who like, okay, that person will maintain my legacy. And that's important to a lot of these partners who, who are like nearing retirement or even past retirement, I'd say many of them.
And also potentially the opportunity for a local firm. Yes, you're going to have global support, from June 15th or another provider, but also, and I saw this in the automotive world about 5 years ago, you had just this great movement of acquisition, and it led to a lot of competitors being taken out of the marketplace. So right now, if you're a local firm, maybe you want to start to double down and look at your local market. Are people leaving their practices? Are they being purchased? Are they closing down? And then looking to fill those gaps with more of an aggressive, sort of marketing campaign. And I think you can grow your local footprint rather than sort of maybe taking on this idea of like, okay, I'm a local firm and maybe now I'm going to start to take on business from different areas. I don't, that's probably not the fit for a local firm, but I do think there are strategies at the local level they can start to look through.
Oh, absolutely. Now let's talk about the platform you've built at RightExit, right? So like, what's broken in the M&A process, right? There's obviously a lot of buyers out there. There's obviously a lot of sellers, and there's just a lot of synergy.
Yeah.
But like, what's broken? Like, what? Yeah, why is it so difficult?
and again, I've been doing this, 7 months at this point, right? So I'm no expert. I can just kind of give you my view on
You're being
things.
humble. You're being humble. I've talking to a lot of people, and the amount of knowledge you have on this is just outstanding, right? So
Thank you. I think so. First of all, Anshul, it's a difficult thing to have a conversation about in a public way, right? And we found that
okay.
early on in the right exit community, where we're providing this education, right? We're putting forth these resources, and people aren't engaging publicly, but behind the scenes, you see they are, right? So it adds this layer of concern and privacy because yeah, you don't want word getting out that you're gonna, looking to sell your business. It's gonna maybe spook your employees, your client base, right? So there's this layer of we don't want to raise our hands in a public way, right? So you've got to build avenues, and that's what we're focusing on is how do you build avenues for those folks to feel safe, to put their hand up, come forward and say, great, yeah, I may not want to engage in some of the traditional relationships, right? That might cause me to, put up some cash, maybe $50,000, $60,000 to get engaged with somebody who can take my practice and start to market it or tell me what I need to do from a succession or exit planning perspective. So I think that's the first thing, right? There's too many gatekeepers in this space. There's a lot of intermediation taking place. So lots of different parties kind of standing in between. Whereas, look, one of the last things I was doing, 3 years ago was in the Web3 space. And sure, there was a lot of phonies and sycophants in that space who ultimately kind of led it to not being a mainstream product anymore. But one of the things I learned in there is the value of community. And if you can build a strong community, you can start to allow people to connect directly with one another. And that is ultimately going to lead to so many more opportunities than you could have created if it was me to onshore, right? It's so much more powerful. It's onshore to 10,000 people. We're going to find that person a buyer, or that person's going to find a buyer, for themselves ultimately.
I love what you said about people wanting to, talk behind the scenes and not being public, because that's something I see too, right? People are interested in, offshoring or global team building, but they are not ready to talk about it publicly because there's just so much stigma around it, right? They don't know what their clients would think. They don't know what their employees would think. They don't even know if this is something they want to do. At this point, they're just exploring. So we actually took a page out of your book. Your
Oh,
former colleague, like, who's helping me now, right? She
shout out to
told
Jess
me,
Lee.
yeah, yeah. So Jessica was the one. She was like, you need to start building a community, right? And that's what we're doing now. And that's this. All of this is part of it. And I agree. The conversations we're having now, people are asking so many sensitive questions about global teams, about India that they would never ask in public because I mean those are important, legitimate questions, right? So we'll
Yep.
talk about the stigma part later. But yeah, I think that's one of the things I love about what you're doing with RightExit because you are connecting like even experts like me with so many people who actually have good questions who need, right? Who really need this. Uh, the other thing that I love about what you're doing is just centralization of data. It's just, I mean, I could Google and see, practices for sale in Toronto or wherever, but that's just it's not in the right format. It's not standardized. I have no idea if that's been vetted. So just that thing, right? And I'm sure you realize that centralization of data that you're doing on the platform, that's just outstanding. And like, I want to know from you, like, how are you like? There's just massive amounts of data on what's on sale and who's buying. Like, so how are you bringing it all into one place?
Yeah, you know, and I'll tell you, Anshul, this is sort of an old playbook of mine that I've been running for the last 10 years. Whatever industry I'm in, I sort of have, I'm a three-trick pony. It's like I can get the data, I can, standardize it, make it searchable, and I can give it to people. And it's like, it doesn't matter if I'm in healthcare or automotive or, now in an accounting practice, M&A. It's just the fact that people need the data in one way. And this goes back to my point around intermediation, right? We shouldn't be afraid we shouldn't treat inventory as sort of IP, right? Inventory, you should be looking at aggregating it, distributing it. And if you think about other industries, and I hate to keep mentioning automotive, but think about that for a second. car dealers, they want their inventory everywhere. They don't
Yeah.
care who picks it up, who pushes it. They'll pay you to, if you bring somebody in on a click. And I think that mentality needs to float over to this space. And I understand that the way that the business is structured now or the industry is structured, it doesn't allow for that. But I think that when ideas can't be stopped when their time has come. And I think an idea like this, is very agreeable to people because they love connecting one on one. In terms of what can you do? I mean, look, I think when I'm talking to accounting firm buyers, they're most interested in things like geography, number of employees, transition plan, technology stack, right? And if you go to a lot of these sites where you're looking to buy businesses for sale, with the exception of geography, none of those filters exist, right? So
Mm.
part of the problem is getting the data, but then also using technologies like AI to understand what it might be in that description of that practice so we can extrapolate it into more of a flat row. And then you can upload that into a database that's fully searchable. And Anshul, I know I gave you access to the tool yesterday for testing. Thank you so much. I've given it to about 30 other people. It's buggy. It's a V1 build. So bear with me, but I think there's something there. And we're actually gonna, I shared it with you yesterday. We're pulling that into our sister company, Spark, which if everybody hasn't checked it out, it's ai.rightworks.com. It's AI built for accounting. So you're going to start to see more of those relationships where we'll build a tool over here in a freemium space, maybe like GPT, and then we're gonna kick it over to our sister company.
So I want to talk more about your GPT tool that you shared with me yesterday. That's outstanding. Like I played around with it for like, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes, and it was just how easy you've made it to like, search anything, right? And like, so I was looking for, all right, well, how many firms are for in sale in Ontario? What's the average price? What's the average multiple? And all of those things, right? It was like, it took me less than a minute to get all of this data. It would have taken me an hour to find it on my own, and I wouldn't even know the quality of that data. So I'm very excited about what you do with the tool because I've not seen anything else like that out there, and that's the need of the market right now.
Thank you. And we're committed to building as many of these tools. And I put out a post last night around a new one maybe that I might build around targeting 1040 practices. And just to be transparent with everybody, like what's that data set? That's the IRS individual filer stats, right? So that's going to give you both at a zip code level, the number of files per category. So it could be, are they filing crypto? Are they filing something that, are they using a prepared signature? What was the amount of the AIG? So if you think about that in mass, and then also pulling in all of the ERO locator records. So these are the people, these are CPAs, they're accountants, right? These are the people who are actually signing off on the tax returns. So if you start to pull that information in a way where you put analysis on the data, right? Trim it down to sort of a list of maybe 40 practices that you want to go after. And then on top of that, where I hope to take the tool is to actually turn it into a contact information discovery tool. So you build your list, you get all your contacts, you can export it, and then you can put it into whatever CRM marketing automation system that you want. And I saw somebody last night mention great comment around, this is probably more of a pipeline builder, and I think they're absolutely right. This is a great way maybe for a new broker or somebody that's maybe had a couple of dry months, right? Once we get this out, they'll be able to use it, build their contact list, start finding those off-market opportunities.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to see what else you do with it. So, yeah, please. I follow you on LinkedIn, so I'll know what you're up to. But so now let's change gears a little bit, right? I want to
Yeah,
talk about talent shortages, right? You've been in the accounting world long enough to know that that's one of the big things. There's AI, and then there's talent shortages. So tell me more about like how these talent shortages is impacting the M&A world.
yeah. I had a great conversation. I was in Charleston back in February at a conference. I'm trying to remember what the name of it was. It was a mergers and acquisitions conference in Charleston. But I had the opportunity at breakfast to sit down with one of the managing directors at Eisner Amper, and he was telling me that right now they are sending interns letters that they're negotiating. So they're
Wow.
coming forward and they're saying, hey, this is what we are offering from a salary perspective, health benefit, all this stuff. And the interns are coming back and they're negotiating those offer letters. So I think that's point one, right? That's a good, it gives you a good beat
Yeah.
on the market. You know better than I do, right? There's always been a shortage of talent in the accounting industry. I think what's going to be interesting now is that over the next year or two, are you going to start to see some of that weight be lifted with the advent of some technologies, that are coming
Yeah.
into the space. But yeah, how can you grow? How can you expand your firm? If you can't get good talent, yeah, it's impossible.
So I completely agree. Like I was in California, I think 2 weeks back, and I was attending their member summit, and a lot of students were there. So the interaction I saw between the students and prospective employers was like, as a student, that would have been a dream come true, where the employers were like, "Hey, do you already have a job?" And like, "Hey, why don't you come, talk to us?" And it was almost like the employers were throwing themselves on the students, and the students were like, "Well, I haven't made up my mind yet." And like, God, where was this job market when I graduated, right? It was just reversed. So I was kind of envious of these students, but like, I felt sorry for the employers because I mean they're desperate at this point.
Right, and I think solutions like yours, and I know we're going to get into sort of some of the quality and demystifying offshore talent, but I think this is really a moment for folks like yourself, especially if you move into the direction of where you've got some AI agents that are helping your total workforce. I think it's a very exciting time for you. I think you're positioned very nicely over the next 5 to 10 years, especially as the M&A market heats up.
Oh, absolutely. I think so. One of the most common requests I get are from search fund owners who want to, buy accounting firms, two or three accounting firms. And there are two things they want to do: bring in technology and build a global team. And they want to use that technology to improve the efficiency of not just their local team, but global team as well. So you talked about something you that's a good segue into my next question. When we last spoke, right, I asked
Yeah.
you, like when you think of building a global team, when you think of offshoring, what comes to your mind? And you said two things. Like first, you're like, what's going to happen to my data, right? I want to know. And second is the quality going to be good enough? So tell me more about that because a lot of people have those thoughts, but people don't talk about that in public as much as they should. So I want to hear more from you. Like when you think of offshoring, what are some fears that come to your mind right away?
Yeah, and what I would say right off the bat is like what I'm going to say isn't fair because there's terrible work everywhere. It's not limited by
Oh,
geography.
absolutely.
So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a safe
yeah,
zone, right? We know this is not about, global team or ethnicity or any of
yeah,
those things, right? Like, I'll tell you, right? I'm Indian, right? I was born in India, grew up in this part of the world, the US and Canada, but I've been on those customer support calls, like early 2000s. You remember those, right?
yep.
Horrendous calls, right? They frustrated me. I couldn't understand what the other person was saying a lot of times. So I can only imagine somebody who doesn't have that exposure. And a lot of what we have right now is like what we think right now stems from those experiences we've had. So I get that, right? I think even people in the offshoring space, they get that it's not about like a country or the fact that you're different. It's just some of it is based on, past experiences, and some of it is just lack of knowledge. People just don't know. So, yeah. So coming back, safe
Yeah,
space, please tell me.
safe space. Yeah. No, I think the first thing is lack of control, right? That plays into like I don't know where my data is going. I don't know who's working on my accounts, right? I don't know the quality of the work that I'm going to get back. Um, I think also for me, it's who's my contact. In the marketing world, in the agency world, we used to say like one throat to choke, right? So who is that person that if things don't work out, is that person going to be accountable to me? Do we have a contract? Is this a business relationship? So I think there's some things those immediately come to mind. But again, like you being out here doing these types of podcasts, bringing in the folks that you're bringing in to have these conversations, I think it all starts with who is the person that's selling me the service. And if it's somebody like yourself who's authentic, has industry knowledge, is well known, that's a, I guess where I'm going with this is like if you're the person that I'm speaking with, I have no concerns, right? If I'm getting maybe spammed on LinkedIn, like a direct message campaign, and somebody's like hitting me up, I'm probably not going to respond to that, right? Because I'm viewing it as that's a low quality service. It's probably cheap. What's the old adage? Like if you view something as cheap, like then you may not want to buy it. But if it's an expensive thing, like it changes the way your mind views it. So I'll stop there. I'm interested to get your thoughts on that.
Oh, I completely agree. I think that's one of the big reasons we're building this community. We're building relationships. Again, shout out to Jessica for all of her help with this. And I get the LinkedIn part, right? I get bombarded with messages every day where people tell me that, hey, we'll set up your team in India. And I tell people that before you send a message, at least look at what I do, right? We're competitors. So I'm happy to talk if we're just starting out. But so I think that happens a lot. I get emails every day. So I can only imagine how many emails like a managing partner gets.
Right.
And the things you mentioned, right? Lack of control, quality issues, like who's going to be my contact? These are very natural worries, right? And it's the fear of unknown. Like I haven't done this. I don't know where to go. I'm already stressed. I have more work than I can handle. Do I want to take on this risk of doing something that I just don't know anything about? And I have some preconceived notions that may or may not help me.
Right.
So these are very legitimate things. So now I want to get your thoughts on this direct ownership thing, right?
Yeah.
Rather than working with, let's say, a third party, let's say you had your own shop in India or Philippines where they're your employees, like you have hired them, you have vetted them. How does that help with some of these concerns you've mentioned, like control, quality, who's my contact? Does that help at all?
It does. In my mind, it's an instant reframing, right? It goes from a liability to an asset. Now I've got something that I have control over. I see the benefits of it. I can work with that team. It's a long-term relationship potentially, right? Those are just instantly, it reframes it for me.
I would agree. Like, I mean, obviously, but still, like I think that's how this was born, right? The first client that came to me, they said the exact same things. They were like, "Hey, we like a global team, but like we want to do it in a way that we have control, right? Where we're not sharing our data with a third party, where we can build our culture so we can get the quality we want, and we want it priced in a way that it works for like a small and medium-sized firm, because the big firms they have the resources to hire the best person wherever in the world and take care of this. But like think of a $2 million firm. They just don't have the knowledge or those resources. This is a big deal for companies like them.
Yeah. When people are coming to you, what are some of the top roles or services that they're seeking from you? Is it traditional sort of accountancy services? Is it advisory? What sort of services do you offer in that vein?
I mean, so people are basically looking to replicate what they have here. Tax prep is the most popular.
Okay.
A lot of bookkeeping, tax prep, most of it goes to India. Bookkeeping, I would say it's half and half. A lot of it is done in Philippines as well. And now that people in Philippines can take the CPA exam without leaving Philippines, that's going to be huge. Because you can do that in India, but you can't in Philippines. So I think it's gonna bring in a lot more firms to Philippines now. And then a lot of people are, so my last client, they started with tax and audit, but now they've expanded to like HR consulting. They're doing some CAS work in India as well. They're also looking to provide IT support to some of their clients from India. And they're setting a team of a couple of AI experts. So that's on their radar for this
Interesting.
year. Because I mean, everybody understands that you need to do something with technology, something with AI. But at this point, it's still an experiment for a lot of these smaller firms, right? That, okay, let's try it out. But that trying out, if you think there's a talent shortage of accountants, try finding AI specialists in the US or anywhere. So
Right.
instead of doing that in the US, excuse me, they're doing it in India. They're going to bring a couple of folks. Um, Obviously, they're saving like a crap load on salaries, but also the
Mhm.
fact that they're able to hire them in India. And then they're going to try and build some applications for their internal use and see how they can improve efficiency, how they can, reduce the workload of both the US and India teams. So people are using their global teams in like a lot of ways. One of the biggest ways that is like leveraging technology, because technology
Yeah.
folks here are like expensive and like hard to come by. But yeah, tax prep, audit, bookkeeping, and then like HR consulting, then technology.
And while you were just talking, I was thinking, I wonder what, and it's probably impossible right now. We're in the early days, but I wonder what the efficiency model would look like for a company who's using offshore talent that's combined with AI. Is it a 40% increase in productivity, for value to dollar? That'll be interesting to see, how much
So,
faster those teams can outpace US labor.
so I have that data point we talked about last
You
time.
know?
You had asked me, right? So I just got it before our call. You had asked me like how many returns an offshore resource can do. So I got three numbers: 60%, 80%, 100%. And the way people broke this down was, if you're hiring somebody who's almost entry level, like maybe they have 1 year of experience, right?
Yeah.
Expect them to do about 60% of what your US resource would do at the same level, right? Somebody who has like 3 to 5 years of experience, they'll be able to do 80% of the returns that your US team member can do. 5+ years of experience, they'll be able to match the productivity of the US resource. So it's not about the number of returns, it's more about percentage utilization or percentage productivity compared to your US resource.
Hmm.
Now, to answer your question about technology, right? This is one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately. If you think about what causes inefficiency when you're working with a global team member, your team is offshore, let's say India, right? There's time difference, right? That's one part. If your team has a question, they have to wait till the next day, right? So there has to be, so I looked at your GPT, right? A lot of times, a lot of questions are very similar, very basic. But if you can have an AI tool that's trained on your firm's data, that's trained on how your firm does things, rather than that offshore resource waiting till the next day, they could just go into like ChatGPT and ask those questions, right? That's a
Yep.
big part of it. Second is communication skills, right? A lot of times I see one of the big roles I play is being that bridge between India and the US, and especially for the leadership, right? Things like writing emails, a lot can get lost in translation. The way American leaders write emails and the way Indian leaders write emails, that's just completely different, right? So you don't need to like, I can only be the bridge for so many people, right? But if
Right.
there's an AI tool that can sort of do that, and I'm sure that exists already, uh, that can bridge that cultural communication divide somehow. I think
Yeah.
that would be huge. And third is just review. Like a lot of things, times I hear is that the offshore people's work needs to be reviewed more. Like you need to spend more time reviewing it. But if there's an AI or like a technology layer in
Yeah.
between that does a lot of this initial reviewing and like, fixing the low hanging fruit. So with these things, right, knowledge, communication, and reviews, if we are able to fix these things, then a lot of the problems that you have with offshoring, they go away.
Yeah.
And so that's how I think of it, as using technology to address like some issues with offshoring and increasing that productivity and efficiency. Did that make sense, or did I just ramble forever?
No, no, no. More rambles like that, man. That was great. And I think one of the things we had talked about earlier was modeling that out in terms of like a dollar, right? It's a dollar saved to a business. Um, I'm interested to see, yeah, you said like what, 60%, 80%, 100% over a 5-year period, maybe at a lower salary, and then getting like at some point there's like a break even hockey stick
So
moment there.
there's some ROI analysis we've done, and like generally speaking, taking into account lower productivity, if you have a team of let's say 5 people, right?
Hmm.
For those 5 people, you're gonna save about half, um, if you have your own office. If you work with an outsourcing vendor, you'll save about 30%. Now, this includes lower salaries. This includes loss of productivity because of time zones and cultural differences. And this includes your overhead in India or like whatever location you choose. So that's the general rule, that direct ownership, you'll save half. With working with an outsourcing vendor, you'll save 30%, and they both have their pros and cons. But that's and then like depending on like if you decide to set up an office in Mumbai or Bangalore, that's going to be more expensive, right? You'll have to pay more in salaries, you'll have to pay more in rent. So the savings go down a bit, but then you'll find folks who have worked for the big four or the top 30 firms. You'll find folks who speak English as their first language. So, but oh yeah, so a lot of so there's two Indias in India. There's India A, India B.
Okay.
India A is the privileged India, is the India that it produces the engineers that go and work for Google, that's sending probes to Mars and all of that. And India B is the underprivileged India, right? That's the stereotypical India. People in India A, which is the India most American firms are going to interact with, right? They speak English. A lot of them, most of them speak English as their first language. So a lot of them have like two or three first
Really?
languages. Yeah. So I have two first languages. Like I spoke English and Hindi growing up. Um, it's
Do you
just
speak French as well?
I don't. I should now that I'm in Canada. So I learned French because when I immigrated to Canada, like we had this test in French, and I
Really?
learned French. I interviewed in French, but it just I live in Toronto. No one speaks French here, so it
Yeah, if
just
you're in Quebec, yeah, it's a different.
it's different, right? Um, but yeah, so that's that's go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, do you want to get into some of the stuff we were talking about the other day? Not specifics, but around like discography and like cultural fits through like AI potentials. Do you want to get in that today at all, or maybe hold that back for another session?
No, let's talk about it. We can always have another session. So
Yeah.
I am like I have a call scheduled with Sam for I think tomorrow or day after. But yeah, one of the things that would improve offshoring a lot is figuring out if this person is going to be a good fit for me, right, or for my
Yeah.
firm. That's a challenge even in the US. But the stakes are higher
Right.
when you're building a global team because you may not get to meet that person as often. So an AI tool that can, or any tool that can help me make that decision, um, that would be huge, right? Something that just says, all right, verified or approved.
Mhm.
So I don't know how that would exactly work, but I'm super interested in something like that. The idea is to de-risk building a global team for anyone who's interested, right? So tell me your thoughts on that.
Well, the first thing is if they're listening to us, right? Because and I say this because you and I had that conversation the other day, and like literally the next day in LinkedIn, my advertising feed was all around like Disc AI products, so that to help make your hiring solutions better. Um, no, I this is a really interesting area, and how I always look at opportunities in my small area of the world is like I think about it in terms of like if I have multiple people in a short amount of time who I trust and I respect come to me and mention sort of the same thing, then it's something worth looking into. You and I had the conversation. Sam and I had the conversation. My boss here at RightWorks, he had a conversation with me about it. There's something there, and I think especially um, the model is going to be so different, right? Like you have a very unique use case. If it's like U.S. Employee to U.S. employer, right? That's a model that you could build, but it's highly influenced by cultural aspects, right? That of behavior. Then you might have like one where it's like Indian employee to Indian company, right? Again, very solvable. What's what'll be interesting with you if you look to build something like this or partner with somebody is like how do you take the U.S. norms, right, and business expectations in with sort of your knowledge of the Indian culture, and then how do you reach sort of like who that perfect person is? Because I don't think like an Indian owned model or a US only model is gonna vet those people out. Like it has to be some sort of cross model that takes into account and does some matching.
Oh, I agree. I mean, it's hard. I don't think I have the answer to that, but that is a problem I need to solve because I feel if I can solve that or whoever solves it, that's a much bigger opportunity than what I'm trying to do right now. Because
Right.
yeah, think about it, right? It just goes beyond accounting then, right?
Yeah.
And the biggest the biggest cultural difference that I see in any two countries, especially US and India, is our threshold for things in these two countries is so different. Threshold for everything.
Mm,
What's the threshold for escalating a problem? Very different in the US, very different in India. What's the threshold for something that's considered good quality? Different. What's the threshold for freaking out, right? If something goes wrong?
mhm.
Very different, right? What's the threshold of convenience, right? All of these things, like the threshold is different in almost everything you would encounter at work, right? When to email, when to call somebody, right?
Mhm.
When to use caps, right? All of those things are so different that that is where most organizations and most global employees fail when it comes to building like a strong long-term relationship with their American clients because and that's the biggest value I brought to my last client, right? Just aligning them that, okay, no, you think the threshold is here, but the people in India think it's here, so let's align, right?
Yep.
Um, and so whatever disk profile, whatever AI tool we use, it needs to have that programmed. It needs to have that. Again, I
Mhm.
don't know how that would go, but I don't think it's impossible. I think it'll take a lot of work. Um, so I'm really looking forward to that conversation with Sam because if we could solve for this, that takes away a lot of risk, right? For anyone, right? Any industry. So that's my take on it.
Yeah. Well, and you probably have a lot of good source material for a starting knowledge base. Like you said, you often act as an intermediary between the parties. So you probably see both sides of the conversation. To your point, like what's the threshold for escalation? What's the threshold for quality? So I think you may already have a lot of that, like really good IP data that
Yep.
maybe Sam might be able to take and turn into a V1 model. Yeah, these are the types of solves with AI that I'm really interested about versus like the car is going to drive itself, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm way more interested in things like this that can, vet and ferret out sort of personality traits from people. Um, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Like anything B2B, right? Especially that goes to small businesses, right? 90% of accounting firms have less than 10 employees, right? So as I think about what I'm doing, right? Like, so Jessica has been pushing me that you need to start focusing on smaller firms too. And now we have a model that works for smaller firms too. But the idea is
Mhm.
technology, whatnot. We need to bring it to like that solopreneur as well. If we can do that, that's when we have like a real revolution. So that's why, yeah, sure. I mean, all these things are exciting, driverless cars and whatnot, but you're right, like small things like that that solve like a real but a prevalent problem. But for a lot of people, that's the opportunity, that's the value of AI, I feel.
I wanted to actually rewind just for a second. You mentioned search funders again. And then you had mentioned it earlier in the conversation. What does that engagement look like? Like that initial conversation, what are they looking for? What is sort of like the maturity cycle look like for a search funder that's coming to you from like first email to landed, has built team?
So we're still in a lot of conversations. So we've had those
Okay.
first and subsequent conversations. We haven't got to landing the client yet. So I'll tell you why. A lot of these search funders, right, they reach out when they're really early in the process, where
Mm,
they are deciding that, okay, I want to buy an accounting firm. Now, what are my value creation pillars? So, technology is an easy one. A lot of people come from a place of technology. People like you who are more comfortable with technology, who understand its potential, right? Who can look beyond what the accounting firms are looking at. So, that's their first layer. Then they start looking at, okay, how do I address the talent part, right? I'm going to get the book of business for these firms, but how do I address the talent part, right? But then how do I address the talent part such that I can also increase my margins? Because I don't just want to pay more for the talent here, because that just doesn't work. So a lot of conversations we have are around, okay, the quality of talent pool and the monetary savings of like, building an offshore team. And the idea is, you talked about this, like de-risking it, right? All right, I do want to build this global team, but how do I de-risk it, right? So when I go to investors or when I go to raise money, right? instead of talking about offshoring from like a weakness that, oh, we got to do it because we can't find people here, we go and talk about it that, all right, we're doing it because yes, A, we can't find people. Two, right, it's going to help us save money. Three, it'll help us adopt technology faster. And here's an ecosystem of things, right? Here's an SBA provider who can provide us with loans. Here's an insurance company that can provide an insurance policy that covers some of these risks. And hopefully with Sam, it can be like, oh, here's an AI tool that helps us weed out, candidates who are not a good fit. So that's what a lot of conversations are around, right? All right, what's the talent available? What's the monetary savings? And what can we do like what support services do we have that can de-risk their so that's where most of the conversations are happening right now. You're on mute, Chris.
Sorry. And thank you for that, because you actually proved a hypothesis. Maybe it's not proven, it's one person. I have to still vet it out. But my thought has been in the M&A space that recruiters are often canaries in the coal mine, right? So if anybody who's watching this and you're involved in the transaction at some point, folks like Anshul are sort of like double valuable, right? Like, yes, they're a resource for building global teams, but also, Anshul, you're probably getting first word or like second or third down the line that somebody's entering the market from a buying perspective. And then I wonder, on the other side of the equation, do you get early indicators that a firm, might be looking to sell or transact in the next 24 months because maybe they're looking to increase multiple by lowering cost of resources? Kind of just scenario based, but yeah, I'll leave it. Yeah. What's your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
so I'm getting more interest from brokers, like who may know firms. Like I've not been contacted by firms directly that, hey, we're looking to sell, we want to do this.
Hmm.
It's more like there's a broker or someone who's working with them who's recommending that, hey,
Hmm.
we've looked at your books. If you were to do this one thing, that would uh, that would help your case. But buyers are more proactive, and I think that says a lot about the industry, right? That buyers, outside buyers, these people, they aren't even accountants, but they see the value. So yeah, it's buyers are more proactive. So are the middle people, like brokers. Firms, like they're more reactive. Like when I talk to them, they're like, "Whoa, we didn't even think about this." Like I mean, they had those first notions about offshoring, but when I tell them about, hey, it's direct ownership, you can, you save money to the end. Like it helps, you can increase your technology adoption and all of those things. So that's when they really start to see that, whoa, this could be something bigger than what we thought. Um,
Hmm.
so those are some conversations like, I do have a question, right? So I think we're
Yeah.
coming up on our time. So I have a question about RightExit. So one of the things you mentioned was that you're building an ecosystem for experts, right? Who can work with buyers and sellers. So I love that. So tell me more about that. Like, how can a buyer or seller use that? Like, what's your writing process like?
Yes. So kind of two tracks there, right? And I should just take a step back. So my role at RightWorks is to work in the innovation lab. My remit is to essentially take a product from paper to validation in the market, and then long term, right? RightWorks as a corporate entity will then take that product and incorporate it within an existing product suite, right? That's sort of how that should work in practice. Um, so I've been working on the Red Exit project for about 7 months now. Sort of clock is starting to tick, right? Are we gonna push this one? So you will probably see this show up in the RightWorks ecosystem, right, as a value add to our customer base. But then me and this department, this innovation department, we're gonna keep pushing the envelope, on this, right? So you're gonna see more tools coming out. To your point around the expert community, one of the things that I'm working on right now is all of these GPT bots that we're building. What I want to be is almost like a search engine, right? So that's actually how I was telling my wife last night what we're building. Like, if Anshul should be mapped and his services should trigger based on maybe like 25 Halo topics, right? And then when somebody is using the tool and they naturally get to a point where resourcing might be an issue or they want to build a global team, I want to be able to trigger Anshul right in there, his information, so that they know that this is a trusted resource in the community, and then we can drive traffic to Anshul, right, as an advisor in the community. That is how I would like it to develop over time, where you remove right exit or me from the process completely. And if you're a member, you should be able to get in there and find practices you're looking for, find somebody to help you support that deal, find an attorney to help you write the LOI, right? Full cycle, and then post integration. That is what Nirvana would look like for us. And I know for some folks who might be watching this, like they're like, he's talking about a Google, he's talking about like an open AI GPT or something like that. I'm not talking about a website. And I want to be incredibly clear about that, because about 3 years ago, I said I thought websites would disappear. I thought they would be replaced by Google My Business. I was obviously wrong on that one. Maybe I'll be wrong on this, but I think you're going to start to see more activity and searchers move towards environments where they can get the information instantly on demand at their fingertips. They don't have to go to a search engine, click to a website, go 3 pages deep. And that's not going to work out long term. So yes, we are very committed to the idea of building inside of any AI system, because it is part of our team's hypothesis that that will become the new search engine. And you're actually seeing that right now. Like if you go search in Google, do like site colon slash chat.openai.com, and then put any word behind that. Could be like accounting. They're now indexing all of the GPTs in the custom store in Google. And then also GPT announced that they're testing their own search engines. You're going to have GPT
Oh
search. So
yeah.
I think we're
I'm
living
very
through a
excited
moment.
about that.
Yeah, yeah. It's like things happen slowly and then all at once. So I think we're like in the slowly phase of, and this I don't want to this isn't going to upset anybody, but like I look at Google like the new Xerox, right? Do you remember Xerox in
Yeah.
the 60s and 70s, like just monster corporation, and now where's Xerox? I think you're going to see that same story play out with Google and a lot of these technology providers who cannot move fast enough. They're just integrating AI. They're not truly driving AI forward.
Well, I completely agree. I think I'm waiting for Search GPT too, and it would be very interesting to see how that stacks up with Google because if it does a good job, I mean that's a big, big, big threat to Google. But yeah, we'll see. So one last question, then we can end the recording. Was there anything else about RightExit, about what you're doing there that we didn't talk about that you want to share?
No, I think we covered it. I don't want to beat a dead horse. I have more respect for your audience than that. So I would say, look me up, look up the Right Exit page. We're doing a lot of interesting things over there. And Anshul knows this. I'm very accessible. Reach out to me if you have an interesting use case of a problem that you're running into in the industry. I'm more than happy to take that, put it onto a poll, push it out to our community, and if there's interest, let's go build it and figure it out.
Right. For the audience, like if you are in the process of buying or selling an accounting firm, if you have questions about it, if you have questions about how you can use AI to improve your firm, anything around technology, like Chris is the person you reach out to. And as I can vouch for it, he's very accessible, he's very knowledgeable, and he's always ready to help. So there you go. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for being with us.